exactly. Mm-hmm. So these meditations are called illimitable or boundless because they are not bounded or limited, basically, because they are sent out to all beings. There's not, we hope that our little group are going to be happy and too bad about anybody else's little group. It's all beings. The love and the compassion which we are generating is unconditional. It's not a matter of I will love people who love me back. I will love people who I think are lovable, and only those people. This is an opening of the heart to all beings, recognizing that all beings, in the depths of their heart, want happiness. They don't want suffering. Just as I want happiness, I don't want suffering. And so this, therefore, is this extension of a feeling of goodwill, friendliness towards everyone. And as I say, not just humans, but also animals and insects and all beings that have consciousness, because all beings also, want to be happy. They don't want to be hurt. I mean, even insects want to be happy. They don't want to be harmed. Of course. Who wants to be harmed? Nobody. And so it's therefore very important to be able to open up our heart to recognize that every single being we meet really wishes for happiness. And to at least be able to extend that goodwill towards them and not be limited and prejudiced just to my family, my people, my nation, and so forth. That's a very narrow way of thinking. So we have, this meditation helps us very much to overcome that, to get rid of these barriers which we set up, that these people are lovable, these people are not lovable. All beings are lovable. Of course they are. So I just got this note which says, if you want questions in this afternoon session, perhaps one could make an announcement. I'm making an announcement for people to write them down and have someone collect them. The organizers can announce before the next session how to collect them. And Boaz or someone will arrange for the collection for the group in the library. Boaz will arrange, okay? So therefore, if anybody does have any questions, it's more helpful if you write them down on a small piece of paper, not foolscap, and then hand them into the organizers. And this afternoon we will devote some of the afternoon to answering at least some of the questions, depending how many we get. If we only get 1 or 2, we can answer them. If we get 100, then we can't. So right now, is there any particular question on this session? Everybody understood beautifully? No questions? Please, you have to stand up and maybe speak into a microphone. Well, because the people who are in the... Okay, I'll repeat the question if it's simple. How do we transform? By practice. Yes, okay. No, truly, honestly, we transform through practice. The good news, believe me, the good news is that all our problems of the mind and our psychological problems, all our narrowness, all our anger and aggression and our greed and our jealousy and our pride and our fears, all of this are not who we really are, right? In Buddhist parlance, they're called adventitious defilements. That means that they're not inherent in our true nature. They are negatively habitual learning. We have become habituated to negative emotions and negative thinking and narrow thinking. But it's not our true nature. So because of that, we can transform. If we were inherently negative, there would be no hope. But because inherently we are the nature of wisdom and compassion, our basic nature is vast, empty in the sense of ungraspable, but luminous, clear, knowing. This is our true nature. Our true nature is very beautiful. And therefore, all we have to do is come back to where we have never really left. It's not that we have to, therefore, develop from outside qualities we never had. It's that we have to uncover those qualities which are part of our true nature. So every time we have an impulse of kindness, every time we have an impulse of compassion or generosity or basic goodness, that is a reflection of our true nature trying to speak to us. Hello, I'm here waiting. And all the negative things inside us are just habits which we have learned and which we can retrain. In fact, one of the discoveries of neuroscience is that our neural pathways actually are not set in concrete. They're actually very plastic and can be changed. So, for example, if you consider like somebody annoys us and we get instantly very angry, right? We get irritable and frustrated and we're very short-tempered with people. And so then people say, well, I've always been like that since I was a child. It's second nature for me to get angry. And so then the question is, well, yes, that's your second nature. What's the first nature? Our first nature is not angry, right? So what we're trying to do is clear away this negative second nature and reveal our first nature. And neuroscientists have proved that we can do that. People who had personality problems and anger, etc., and they did courses in loving kindness meditation. And of course, they were mapping it all. They discovered that within a very short time, just 2 or 3 weeks, those parts of the brain which lit up when we're upset and angry decreased and decreased. And those parts of the brain which lit up when we're happy and peaceful and friendly started to glow bigger and bigger and bigger within a very short time. And they discovered that if people went away and kept on doing every day just a short amount of this practice, they didn't decline and go back again. So we can transform. This is really the good news. Please believe me. We all can transform. But the bad news is that we have to practice.
Do you have a suggestion how to practice with people that they have a lot of hate towards themselves and towards people that they close people to them, and they have many enemies? For example, prisoners that they...
So how to deal with people who have a lot of self-hatred, which then of course projects out as hatred toward and anger towards others, with the result that they end up with a lot of people who are like enemies for them. For example, she says, like people who live in prisons. Aileen, speak. Aileen used to work in prisons, so she can speak from her own experience.
Prison, and that no matter how beautiful or how ugly our environment, the job is still the same. We have to, as Jetsunma was saying, we have to first cultivate loving kindness towards ourselves, and then that will permeate outwards to those around us. We're not going to change the whole world. The helicopters will probably still fly over our heads, but as long as we can change what's happening within ourselves and then change all of our interactions one by one by one, slowly, 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 it trickles out.
Yeah. I mean, even in prisons, you know, people sometimes go there to teach meditation, and there are a number of DVDs of these real tough guys after 10 days of Vipassana, and just that, how much it brings up for them, and how much in that short time they can begin an inner transformation. But ultimately, it depends each one on ourselves. We cannot do it for someone else. We can only give them the means to do it for themselves. So that if someone is in a state where they have a lot of anger, one can suggest maybe that this is causing them a lot of pain, and would they like to know about, you know, ways of dealing with anger. Give them a book on, you know, dealing with anger. There are plenty of books out there on, with giving many techniques for dealing with negative emotions, but one cannot force them to read it. And one cannot then force them to practice the practices which are within them. All one can do is give them the opportunity. Beyond that, it's up to each one of us to make the efforts. To transform our habitual tendencies is not so easy. The important thing is to remember it's doable. But first we have to change ourselves. You know, it's always easy to see what other people's problems are and how they should change to make a better world. But it always, in the end, starts with ourselves. You know, that's where the real change has to come. And when your immediate family and colleagues start saying, you know, you're so much nicer nowadays, what are you doing? Then you might consider that perhaps the practice is working a little bit. If people find you more uptight than ever, then we're probably on the wrong track. So what can I say? I mean, one can help, try to suggest, but one cannot change others. Others only can change themselves.
You said that the mind is interested in the past or in the future.
So she's saying that the mind is always interested in the past and in the future, and solicits comments on that. Well, the ego, which is another word for our ordinary conceptual thinking mind, can actually only live in the past and the future. It cannot actually live in the present. If our ego tries to live in the present, it can only live in the present by commenting on it. This is why mindfulness is a challenge, And mindfulness here meaning simply being conscious of what we're doing while we are doing it without making lots of commentary about it. By rights should be very easy, because after all the only time we have is now, but in fact is extremely, takes training, because the ego is very uncomfortable just being in the bare present, and is endlessly embellishing that with its comments and its ideas, and then going back and comparing it with other times when they tried the practice, or anticipating how it's going to be in the future when they're always totally mindful. But the one thing the ego doesn't want to do is just stay present and shut up. And so this is the nature of the conventional mind, and is why a genuine practice of mindfulness cuts through it all, because it's going in completely the opposite way to where the ego wants to go. And the ego cannot live, actually, in a present which is actually experienced with awareness. As I say, one of the problems is that, okay, we say, right now, everyone mindful, right? We're all going to, for example, I'm going to now drink some water mindfully. Right, so I'm going to be present, knowing that I'm going to drink the water, right? So, you know, you reach out and you pick it up and you start to drink it. Then, fine, then look, it's easy to be mindful. Anybody can be mindful. Say, look, I'm mindfully drinking this water. There's no problem at all. What's she talking about? Anybody can be mindful. I remember when I was mindful when I did that course in... So this is the problem. It's very difficult for the actual ego to just be quietly conscious without comment. In fact, the ego cannot do that. And that's why this afternoon we will deal with looking at the mind. And once we start looking at the mind, we see very clearly how the mind is always in the past or in the future, or running around the present. But it's never just knowing the present, because that's the nature of the ego. And it's why our minds become so stressed, because we're endlessly filling up the mind with all this babble of talk, which obscures the present moment, and is very tiring for the brain, actually. And it's very inefficient. It doesn't contribute anything. I mean, it doesn't mean that there are not times when we can remember. It doesn't mean there are not times when we can plan, and so forth. There are times when we can comment on what we're seeing and so forth. But we should have that at our control, so that we decide, right now I'm going to remember this, now I'm going to plan this. You know, not that it's just like, as it is traditionally described, like a waterfall, which is endlessly just tumbling down, crashing down and making a lot of noise, and just is out of control. So it's a very inefficient mind. It doesn't really work very well, because we get caught up in all sorts of negative emotions. We don't remember things properly. Our minds are so distracted, we cannot really plan things properly. I mean, if we had a well-organized mind, then, you know, we would make wise decisions, we would speak skillfully, we would always act skillfully, our minds would be peaceful, happy, kind, under all circumstances, because that's what we would really like. And the fact that our minds are not like that, that we do things which are not kind, which are not nice, which are very unskillful, which cause a lot of problems for other people and for ourselves, is because we're not in control of our own mind. And yet our mind pre-exists from our speech and our actions. How we speak and how we act depends on the thoughts behind it. So obviously, we have to get our thought process into some kind of good shape. And really recognize what's going on inside there and the chaos that's going on inside there. Often masked because we don't want to admit the real feelings that we have, since those are not acceptable. So we always can condone our actions. But if we really look in there, often it's a mess. Isn't it? Sometimes I say if we had loudspeakers on our mind and everyone could hear what we were thinking, then the meditation centers would be overflowing. But even though other people cannot hear what we're thinking, we have to hear what we're thinking. And, so this afternoon we're going to deal with that, with turning our attention onto the mind itself. So that first we recognize what a mess it is, and then get some clues as to how to clean it up a bit.
I just wanted to say that it's very easy in my trip to have this it's easier to tame the mind. But then the real challenge comes when you go out to doing work.
Of course. I mean, this lady is pointing out that it's very nice and easy to sit here and try taming the mind. But as soon as one leaves and goes back into the world again, of course it all falls apart. We'll deal with that a bit later. But of course it's a big problem, and especially in our very stressed out, busy everyday life, and also in a society where most people are not supportive of our aims. This is always a big problem, and why the Buddha always emphasized the importance of the community, of the Sangha, of supportive, good friends who share our values and therefore are able to remind us. But we'll deal with this later, okay? So for now, I think it's time for lunch. Is this very relevant and short? Yeah.
Because sometimes I meet people that are practicing many years, and even teachers that have very big ego.
Yes, I know. This is why she's saying that she meets people who have been practicing for many years and even teachers, and they have very big egos. Yes, exactly. And this is why it's very important to look at the mind. Huh? Well, it depends what you're doing while you're sitting and sitting. The ego can take anything. And the ego likes nothing better than to be a nice, big, shiny, spiritual me. So much superior to all the unspiritual non-me's. And this is why we have to really be conscious. And also, I think a lot of why we have to set our motivation. It's not for the inflation of our ego. It's really in order to really train the mind to be of some kind of benefit to all other beings. But of course the ego will take on anything. I mean, you're absolutely no bigger egos than in the spiritual field. And absolutely, I agree totally. Don't we know? So we can't do anything about other people's egos and super egos. But we can do something about our own, So each one of us has to be conscious that we are not doing it in order to make a bigger, better, more beautiful me, but to heal our sense of self. Because once that sense of self is healed, then we're not so preoccupied with ourselves, It's while the ego is not very healthy, then it can get very bloated and very dominant. Once it's healthy, like a healthy body, we don't have to think about it so much. So the first thing is to heal the ego and make it softer and healthy, and then, you know, drop it and see through it. And if one comes across people with super big egos, then compassion. How about that?
There's no more questions right now.
Yes. So we meet again at 3 o'clock?
Yeah.
2 o'clock?
No, they have a different schedule.
Oh, okay. We will meet again when we meet again.